right, welcome to Warp Zone.
Warp Zone.
I'm Phil Villarreal.
I'm Sean Nugent.
I guess I'm playing the guest today, joining these lovely gentlemen, Jose Sosaya.
Yeah, Jose on the hot seat. Thank you for joining us today. So, just to get it out of the way, quick. Lightyear came out. I was the only one, I think, here that saw it. You didn't see it, did you, Jose?
I have not. I'd love to get your thought. I mean, obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Or you shared, that impression, Phil. But I guess I'll have my ideas going into the movie. But let's start with you, please.
It's a strange little movie, and it didn't do very well. I mean, it's not that surprising that no one here saw it, because basically no one did go out and see this one. It only opened to 51 million domestic, even worse internationally, 34 million. It was banned in 14 countries due to a same-sex kissing scene, which had got it banned in several, I believe, primarily Middle Eastern countries. But this is just not, it's a very weak Pixar effort. They've been in a slump for a while. I like Soul. That, to me, that was the last really solid Pixar movie, but they've had Turning Red and that one that was released last year. Its name even is
Luca. Luca, was it, Phil?
That was weak sauce. You nailed it. Thank you for remembering that. So, yeah, it's been rough times for Pixar. This one is a Toy Story spinoff. It's definitely its most lucrative franchise. You see Buzz Lightyear in the 1995 movie that inspired the toys. This is the movie that Andy loved so much in 1995 that made him want to get a Buzz Lightyear toy. And it's just a very basic action movie. There's not that typical pathos you see in Pixar movies in this one. And the animation's fine. There's nothing wrong, but it's really distracting. You've got Chris Evans in the lead role due to Tim Allen being replaced. And a lot of the talk on the internet is that happened because of Tim Allen's conservative views. So there's not real confirmation on this, but that just kind of got this movie off to a weird start, and that's just the way it goes throughout. So I wouldn't recommend this one. Maybe if you're a super fan of the Toy Story franchise, maybe check it out just to complete your viewing there. But what about you, Sean? What you didn't see this? What's your take on the whole Lightyear setup? Like, why don't you want to see this one?
Well, they already have they had a cartoon series in the early 2000s that kind of covered Buzz Lightyear's adventures. I'm assuming it was based on whatever Andy had watched for the toy. To me, it looks so clean and so pretty for a movie that should have been like mid 90s. It should look mid 90s. It should be cheesy. It should look like Stargate or one of those, and it doesn't. It just looks way too clean and way too modern. And the whole time I'm thinking they could have done so many interesting things with this movie, and to me it just looks like as plain as you can get, as safe as you can get.
Yeah, you really nailed it. There's not any sort of 90s references whatsoever. It's like they added that subtitle in the beginning of the movie just kind of haphazardly. What about you, Jose? Are you drawn to this at all? You think you see it at some point?
I'll tell you, Phil, if I do make time to see it, it won't be in the theaters. I think, we could have an entire other separate discussion about the kind of content Disney seems to be wanting to shelve for Disney Plus or direct to streaming versus what they want to release in theaters. I think, Sean kind of nailed it on the head. You did as well with a lot of, great points. Maybe, I don't know how the studio makes this calculation about something they think is going to connect with an audience, because again, the problem is we've at least for us in the younger generation, like we grew up saturated with Toy Story 1 and 2 kind of within a 5-year span. And then, as we kind of the sequence, the timing of things where we just became adults as Toy Story 3 and 4 was phasing out, it's sort of like the story kind of, it might have found an organic ending. So why this is my gripe with the major film studios. Why do we keep going back to the well of ideas? You keep trying to squeeze as much juice out of this lemon as you can, where I'm just like, at some point there may be no new stories to tell. So does that then lead to, like you mentioned, Phil, this sort of, cookie cutter, blasé action movie that is only coasting on brand recognition and brand names. So if like my impression on that is like, I am not going to put the time in to sit down in a movie theater to watch that. I'll just wait for that to come to me if I'm in a mood. If I'm in a mood to decide to see what it's all about. Otherwise, I think I'm willing to pass for now.
All right, so maybe we can move on to what we've been playing recently. I know you've got a review in the hopper, Sean. Excited to hear about that. But first, a game that we both played, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge. This is a game that does exactly what Lightyear does not. It nails everything that's so 90s, maybe even late 80s a little bit too. This is a beat 'em up. It's just like TMNT Arcade from back in the day in Turtles in Time. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with these, Jose, but I can't recommend this game highly enough. It's a fun game, 6 players at the same time, just like the X-Men cabinet from back in the day.
Wow.
There's all sorts of like griefing potential here, like with your friends. There's a lot of online play. So like everything that older games didn't have that they would have benefited from is in this game. So I love this one. Sean, I know you're a big fan of this too. What were your impressions on that? And is it lasting for you? Are you still playing this at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is the kind of game that takes me back to my childhood. I was on the cusp of that, like that era of arcade games, the beat 'em ups. You know, you had the Simpsons, you had the X-Men, you had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. This game just nails it, and it's so much fun. In co-op, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot of in-jokes. There's so much good stuff in this game. It really nails the 90s era, and it makes me want to like put it on a CRT, sit in a basement with a box of pizza, and just relive that era of gaming.
Jose, do you have any experience with the old arcade beat 'em ups? Like, do you have a favorite? Did you play TMNT back in the day?
You know, it was sort of a weird experience, Phil, because for me, it getting into like the older consoles was a newer thing for me, because when your first console is a PlayStation, you're trying to play catch up. But as far as, you know, the TMNT, your first foray is the original cartoon, and then you find those beat 'em ups. It's sort of my mind. When I think of that, though, it's sort of like Tekken becomes like my immediate recall, but it still sounds really exciting. If Sean, and maybe you want to chime in on this too, is sort of how referential it is to that nostalgia of the 90s that we are so familiar with. What do you like? If I'm someone that remembers that positively, is this a great callback to that?
For sure. It's got the soundtrack, as John Vick says down here. The soundtrack Shredder's Revenge is amazing.
Awesome.
It's got that soundtrack. It's got all the sprite work is amazing. The backgrounds are just full of references. It just feels like that era. It just perfectly encapsulates. Like if this game had come out in 1994, it would fit. And at this point in time with gaming, and I think I said this in the review, it's so nice to have a game that is this compact and just this easy to pick up and play when everything is an open world. Everything is so overcomplicated.
And if you can, Jose, I would get to this game just if only to play the very first level in story mode, because it's just like a satire of the news industry and like newsrooms in general, especially in the 90s. Like it's just like you kind of go through like a morning blend thing as well. Like you got like a little kitchen in there. It's just like so funny. And April is my favorite character to use. I never even knew she was playable. I never even realized she had martial arts skills, but she does great things like a mic drop. Like one of my favorite things about this game is how you can taunt. You need to taunt to build up your special meter. And one of the things, she just like has all these funny, like corny news sayings. Like she's a great character. So like get to that if you can. It's, like, good. So I'd like to hear your reaction to it.
Sure. And it seemed like maybe my impression was like a Casey Jones was going to be a playable character, but to hear you, Phil, say that, oh, April, that adds like another layer where it's like these characters you thought would be NPCs, you know, years ago were like you're not playing them. You're only playing the 4 turtles. Like, okay, now I'm really interested, guys.
Yeah, and not to spoil, but Casey will make an appearance. Just about every character you could imagine makes some kind of appearance. At least as an unlockable in this game, or like as a mission giver. So yeah, like anything, like obscure characters I have no idea about, and I think I've seen probably every episode 3 or 4 times, but like they escape my memory, but they definitely exist. The bosses are hilarious too. But Sean, tell us about the other game you're reviewing. What have you got cooking that you took a little bit of your attention away
Oh,
from TMNT?
yeah, it took a little of my weekend. The review will come out at some point. It's called AI: The Somnium Files. I'm trying to think of what the rest of it is. You could tell it's an anime game because it is nonsense title. Something Initiative. Something Initiative. That's how much it stuck with me. It's a visual novel. It's the kind of game that you just click through the plot. There's some elements of detective work. And it's interesting, but it's the kind of game that I have to be in a very specific mood to play because it's not really a game. It's more of an experience, more of like a playable movie or a playable anime. The characters are all very strange and ridiculous. They have what they call AI balls, which is the worst pun I've ever heard. It's like Hand Grenade and Death Race 2000. But they have these AIs in their eyes. They're cute little anime girls that you can dress up because, of course, they are. And they're trying to figure out this body showed up in the middle of a studio, cut in half, and it's laying on the floor, and it's just teleports there. And then 6 years later, the other half teleports into a soccer field. So they're trying to figure out how this happened. So if you're into this sort of game, it's definitely interesting. It's got good characters. It's got good writing. But for me, it's kind of it's there's not a lot going on like gameplay wise.
So John left a comment about the soundtrack to Shredder's Revenge, and he says it's amazing, constantly humming it while he does chores around the house. Yeah, just like that first riff of the TMNT theme song will always stay with you if you've even seen it once. Yeah, there's some great music. Like there's some original like rap songs in this game. There's some hair metal-esque stuff. Like it's a really great mix. Sean, what's your musical take on TMNT before we move off of this game?
Oh, the rap song when that comes in during like a boss fight or whatever, that is so 90s. That is so great. It's so cheesy and corny, and I love it. Like I said, this game just encapsulates the 90s. And people like us who grew up during that period and played all these games, it's such a treat. It's so good.
And you've seen some other like attempts at resurrections. Like there was a Battletoad remake. The graphics were really sharp and focused. It wasn't 90s. It had moved on too much. This game doesn't make any effort. This is exactly a 16-bit Genesis or SNES style game. So like it's magical. But before we started, guys, we were in a big debate, a mass three-way debate involving James Bond. We were arguing about everything Bond. So that's what we're going to shift to the rest of our time here. Let's clear the palate a little bit. Let's get everybody to say their favorite and least favorite Bond film. We'll start with you, Jose. What do you got? What's your favorite Bond film? What's your least favorite?
So can I tell you, Phil, I hate watch this one only because the first Bond I ever saw were the Brosnan movies. Like that was my first introduction to it, and I want to say was it The World Is Not Enough? Is that what I'm thinking of? Where it's funny enough, relevant to us. We work in news.
Oh, yeah. That was before its time, I think. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time, I'll say.
It just wasn't for me. Although it's funny enough, I'll watch Die Another Day, and I also think, God, like this is such a dated movie. So I feel like I'm just wailing on the Brosnan years, where that's not entirely fair to that production team and him. Again, might be recency bias would tell you I loved Casino Royale, the Craig version, but when I bought like a whole disc set of the Connery ones, and you're like, I mean, how are you not going to love like From Russia with Love or Thunderball, Dr. No? Like I immediately think back to sort of the what they were as period pieces to me, and the spy thriller, like the tone setters, the trend setters. That's what I think of as sort of like the marquee classic Bond movies for me, at least.
I'm going to go Diamonds Are Forever as my number one.
Okay.
I came to it after having seen the Austin Powers films and just seeing how exactly like Austin Powers that movie is. That made me love it all the more. To me, that makes it so iconic as a Bond film. And the worst is going to be Die Another Day for me. Yeah, like you said, so awful, so hard to watch. Quantum of Solace is pretty close to the worst to me because it's got no sense of humor in it. But yeah, I'm gonna go Die Another Day. That's just as bad as just about
it jumps the giant wave and the shark. How's that, Phil? It just jumps the giant wave and the shark.
All right, Sean, now Quantum of Solace lover Sean, let's hear it.
I'm not a Quantum of Solace lover. It's in the middle for me. So first of all, I'm a huge James Bond fan. My entire life I've been watching these movies. So if you need anything, first of all, Jose, the movie you were talking about is Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
The World Is Not Enough is the next one. It's about the oil barons.
Is that the one with Denise Richards, Christmas Jones, those awful Christmas puns? Okay.
Where she is a nuclear physicist and really sells it. Does a great job.
Sure.
Son of Fernando, Goldfinger reigns as the best.
Sure.
Yeah, I would usually go Goldfinger for best, but that's so generic and a choice. I'm going to say On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Okay.
I think
Look
a lot.
at you. We're going for Lazenby.
Wow. The one Lazenby.
Nice. Who's still alive? Who's still with us?
He's still alive. He was supposed to sign on to a deal for like 10 movies or something, but he refused to shave his beard. He refused to, like, he had the hippie look. And it was probably for the best because he wasn't a great actor. The movie he was in, absolutely fantastic. But he's not the best Bond by any means. What about Octopussy? Not even in my top 20. I think that's one of the worst ones, to be honest. The Fabergé eggs. Oh man, that's a terrible one. So favorite On Her Majesty's. Least favorite. I mean, Die Another Day is god awful. It's terrible.
So somehow we're agreeing on that being the worst. Somehow I think we agree. Like it just was too much for what it is.
It's
what
so
I'm going to say is
cheap.
underrated too is GoldenEye. Like to me, I can watch GoldenEye again and again. It spawned a great game. The only really good James Bond game ever created.
I think GoldenEye is honestly a lot of people's favorite, and it's the first one a lot of people did see. So it's in my top 10. It's not like in my top 5, I don't think. I'd have to look at I rated these movies, all of them. I'd have to look at it, but On Her Majesty's Secret Service is definitely number 1.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and on a limb here and say Daniel Craig is the worst James Bond actor. Not necessarily his fault. It's just the lamest take on James Bond. They tried to be hard. It was a reaction to Triple X. It was a reaction to these other hard-edge spy movies at the time. Like, okay, now we're not going to joke around anymore. We're going to bring in this serious, grim James Bond. I don't like that take. I like a fun James Bond. I like a guy who's having fun. And I would like to model the next James Bond choice off of anyone but Daniel Craig. I don't want to see it go in that direction anymore. And now I get that his era had to be defined by his own take on it and the writer's own take. But yeah, I can definitely do without that whole era.
So then, Phil, who do you have as the on the cheesier end of that spectrum? Like somehow I might think of Connery not so like more toward the middle. Like unfortunately, I take Brosnan as kind of leaning a little too into the cheekiness of it, you know.
I think they all lean very hard into it. Lazenby, maybe not as much. Maybe he's more of a precursor to Daniel Craig, but oh my gosh, yeah. Some of those earlier ones are so cheesy, and maybe they weren't intending to be, but they certainly come off that way now. But yeah, Pierce Brosnan, I think, is underrated as a Bond. To me, he's my favorite Bond. It's probably weird to say, but like he just I don't know, he just has fun with it. Like even though he isn't the worst James Bond movie ever made, he is in one of the better ones and a couple of the better ones. Like to me, he's like, I guess maybe because I was a teenager when he was James Bond, starting to be at least. He's always going to be my personal Bond.
Sure.
But who do I want to be James Bond? I think it is time for Idris Elba. That's a generic choice because everybody on the internet says him. But why not? Come on, just give the people what they want. Like give it I'll tell you who I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be anyone like, Miles Teller. I don't want like an unconvincing Bond. I don't want Tom Holland. Like I'm one of the few people who like that Uncharted movie, despite like against my will. But like I don't want to see Tom Holland as Bond. I want a tough, relatively imposing Bond, not some teenager of the week.
Do you think Tom Hardy veers too close to the Craig realm for that, Phil?
I think he would. I think he'd be a super serious one. I wouldn't want to see Clive Owen either. Like I want to see like a just like a fun, cheesy, like more '90s action movie style Bond. I don't want to see The Rock, even though he is very much in that archetype. Rock's in too many things. Please,
Yes.
not another franchise for this guy. Black Adam is where I draw the line for that man. So, all right, what about you, Jose? What are you thinking? Who's your dream next Bond?
Oh man, it's the thing. It's just for some reason, like the conversation, Phil. You mentioned how Idris Elba he checks all these boxes. So yes, he seems like a safe choice. I'm trying to think who would be a good, because I'm trying to think British. Where it's like, do you think maybe I'm just throwing this out there to the chat guys, a Jamie Dornan type, or maybe 50 Shades of Grey wasn't the greatest material for him to flex his acting, but I think he was in Belfast, which is a fairly serious, well received movie. So maybe he leans into the younger Bond, where you might believe he's more of that playboy spy type. I may be blanking on a couple where I think they might be really strong picks. He just came into my mind as sort of a dark horse, so to speak. I don't know. Yeah, could be that. Sean, if you have any that you're thinking of, I'll go through my list and say who else might be.
And so
we're getting
here you go, Sean. Just know that
Robert Pattinson,
of course.
Batman and James Bond. Why not?
Yeah.
But what do you think, Sean?
I don't know. We were talking about bring back Timothy Dalton. Just let old Timothy Dalton come back. Where did he go? What happened to him?
Sure.
He's been acting in a lot of TV series and such recently, and I think he could possibly be a convincing like old man Bond if they want to keep going with the Craig.
I want to see a Bond like the Shaft reboot, like the second Shaft reboot with Dalton, Lazenby, and the new Bond, like the grandpa, the son, and like great grandpa.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to pitch. I'm going to go take a meeting about this.
Don't pitch that, because we're going to get an Into the Spider-Verse or whatever style. It's going to be like the multiverse of Bond.
And that's exactly what Die Another Day did. It treated all Bonds as though they're one unified entity, which they can't be. Like here's the thing. I'm down on the Daniel Craig Bonds, but I will speak out in favor of No Time to Die just because of its ending. And I don't think it's a spoiler alert at this point, because if you haven't seen this movie by now, you're never going to, that he dies at the end. And guess what? That's what every Bond should do at the end of his era. Just show that it's a different universe. It's just, just end it. There's not been the same guy. There's always going to be a different person named James Bond. There's always going to be no 007, but they have nothing to do with each other.
Well, that was the best end, because if you think about how the others ended, the big ones, Sean Connery ended by giving a man a wedgie, putting a bomb in him, and throwing him overboard. That's the end of the Sean Connery era, which I love Diamonds Are Forever, because that movie is just is wild.
It really is.
And then Roger Moore, the end of his era is him. How do I put this politely? Getting in bed with a woman who is like 30 years younger than him, which he even admits in the commentary track. He's like, it was weird because I was her mom's age, basically. So, and A View to a Kill, it's a pretty good move. It's a pretty good movie, but Roger Moore looks like he just walked out of he was one of the wax statues at Madame Tussauds or something by then. So the fact that Daniel Craig, I appreciate that Daniel Craig got that ending. And it kind of needed to be that way, because they needed to start over from scratch. There was no way they could continue this. And if they did, it just fall apart. But the fact that that's where it ended is also, I think, detrimental to the entirety of the Craig era.
Right, Sean. Jose, I heard your thoughts on Quantum of Solace. We can't leave this alone. Sean defends this one. Both you and I really dislike it. What are you telling us about Quantum of Solace? Like, what is your take on that movie?
So One thing, Phil, that I if I already repeated this to you, I apologize. But for whatever reason, they decided to establish a continued universe, right? If you remember Casino Royale, we had the main Bond girl, Vesper. So I will give the writers credit that somehow her imprint, her spirit is somehow weaved into the entire Craig universe. Fine, give me a little consistency. The actress in the second movie in Quantum, Olga Kurylenko, just no discredit to her performance, but what is it about like just this? It's sort of the fact that in the end she became a throwaway Bond girl, like that seemed like not the best writing. In full context, though, and I know we brought this up, was right around the time of the writers' strike. So, could they do enough with it? Did they have enough staff to kind of work out all those plot holes? Maybe not. Okay, there was another thing, Phil, where we talked about the more menacing villain. I do not think Dominic Green was more menacing villain than some of the other offerings in the series. Blofeld was more, quote, menacing. The Savin, I think, was or Safin, whatever his name was, in No Time to Die, was a little more unhinged. Like, he made me feel a little more uncomfortable. Le Chiffre in Casino Royale, for sure. Like, if he wasn't the strongest, or Silva, like those were the stronger villains. Is it a hot take to say it was the weakest villain in Quantum of Solace? And so to me, that kind of gives it a huge thumbs down. So maybe, I don't know, Phil, what do you think beyond that?
Yeah, I'm disgusted by Quantum of Solace. It's just boring. It's long. It doesn't do anything for me. It has a horrible title. I hate the way they try to explain the title too.
Sure.
But Sean, let's hear it. Let's hear why it's a good movie.
Okay. They never explain the title. They're like Quantum because they didn't have the rights to Spectre at the time. So they're like, we're going to call it Quantum. Okay. The titles are terrible. Jack White. I hate Jack White. That is one of the worst opening sequences. I mean, it's up there with Die Another Day. Die Another Day is awful.
So hot take, Madonna, Jack White did not do.
Terrible. The editing and everything, terrible. You think M gets shot at one point in the movie because the editing is so bad. My thing with it is that it feels like a spy movie. I like some portions of it. I like Dominic Green, and I think, no, he's not menacing, but they kind of show that. I mean, when he's going at Bond with the axe, he gets himself in the foot. Like, he's just a clumsy, terrible villain, and I think that shows. Plus, the main villain ends up being like that general guy. Like, he has to have all these other people with him. I really like the scene at the opera with all the Quantum people. I think that was a really well done, really interesting scene. And it's so much more, it makes more sense than in Spectre when everyone's just like sitting around a table and you're thinking, Bond knows that these people are here. Why can't they just like drone strike, have the cops show up, do literally anything? Because all of Spectre is sitting right there in this building.
I'll give you that.
Like, I think it's more watchable probably because it's only 90 minutes long. And it's more interesting to me than like Spectre. Spectre's so boring. Spectre to me is almost as bad as No Time to Die, but No Time to Die is like the worst.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but isn't Quantum of Solace the only movie to directly continue off of another one? Oh, no, I guess not, because No Time to Die did off of Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
The movies have had some continuity where like he'll go to Tracy's grave at one of the Roger Moore movies, the one where he drops Blofeld down a smokestack. I can't remember which one that was, but he goes to Tracy's grave. So there's a little continuity, but that was the first one where it was like a direct continuation of the movie before, which was interesting. At the time, I really liked the movie. As I rewatch it, I don't like it as much because it's stuck between Casino Royale, which is an amazing film, even if it is like 4 different films in one, and Skyfall, which redefined Bond for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Redefined me in a bad way, though.
Real quick, Sean, you were thinking of For Your Eyes Only. I just did the quick check. Was that it? The chimney drop?
For Your Eyes Only is when when he picks up Blofeld's in a wheelchair, and he goes, I'll buy you a stainless steel kitchenette or something like that. And Bond just like drops him down a smokestack, and it's like, that's how you kill the main villain of the series. So, okay. Which, to be fair, I still like more than how they kill Blofeld in No Time to Die, because that was just like so stupid.
It had to fit. It had to fill with the plot. It had to fit in with the plot in No Time to Die somehow.
Why did MI6 not know that he had a cybernetic eye? Did they not do a full body inspection of this man? Which I did kind of like, that he had his little eyeball birthday party thing. That was kind of ridiculous and sort of awesome. But at the same time, so stupid in the Craig era. That felt like a Roger Moore thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very out of place for me. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? They just don't care. To me, Quantum of Solace was, I'm going to bring back an early 2000s word. It's a webisode. It's like, it's very like half-hearted, very like extraneous, unnecessary. I could do without it, but I respect your defense of it, Sean. You've got a very well-reasoned take on it, so thanks for providing that.
It doesn't do anything, but I don't think any of the Craig movies really do much.
That's true. Just like WarpZone.
Yeah, WarpZone's not helping. It's not hurting. It's just here.
But hey, we wouldn't hear these takes otherwise, Sean. So this is good.
Well, I guess we can wrap it up, guys. But thanks, Sean. Thank you, Jose, for being our special Bond guest. And guess we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for having us, everybody.